Question 1. The evaluation methodology shows that the firm's current network security relies on a single, high-capacity firewall protecting the entire corporate network, which handles customer transactions, internal communications, and sensitive financial data. Given the increasing sophistication of cyber threats and the regulatory landscape in the UK, which of the following network security strategies would best address the identified vulnerabilities and ensure compliance with relevant financial services regulations? Option A. Implement network segmentation to divide the network into smaller, isolated zones and deploy intrusion detection and prevention systems, IDs/IPS, to monitor and block malicious traffic across these segments. Option B. Upgrade the existing firewall to a next-generation firewall with advanced threat prevention features without altering the network architecture. Option C. Deploy intrusion detection and prevention systems, IDs/IPS, across the entire network, but maintain the current flat network architecture. Option D. Focus on enhancing endpoint security solutions and user awareness training while deferring significant network infrastructure changes due to budget constraints. The correct answer is A. Implement network segmentation to divide the network into smaller, isolated zones and deploy intrusion detection and prevention systems, IDs/IPS, to monitor and block malicious traffic across these segments. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical need to balance robust network security with operational efficiency and compliance with the UK's regulatory framework for financial services, specifically as it pertains to data protection and system resilience. The firm's reliance on a single, monolithic firewall for all network traffic, including sensitive customer data and internal administrative functions, creates a significant single point of failure and a broad attack surface. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing a network security strategy that not only mitigates these risks, but also adheres to the principles of data security and integrity mandated by regulations such as the UK GDPR and the Financial Conduct Authority (FCA) handbook. The correct approach involves implementing network segmentation and deploying both intrusion detection and prevention systems, IDs/IPS, alongside the existing firewall. Network segmentation, by dividing the network into smaller, isolated zones, limits the lateral movement of threats. If one segment is compromised, the impact is contained, protecting other critical areas. IDS/IPS systems provide an additional layer of defense by actively monitoring network traffic for malicious activity, and in the case of IPS, taking automated action to block or mitigate threats. This multi-layered approach aligns with the FCA's expectations for robust cybersecurity controls and the UK GDPR requirement for appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure data security. It demonstrates a proactive and defense-in-depth strategy, which is a cornerstone of effective information security management. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on upgrading the existing firewall's capabilities without addressing the fundamental architectural weakness of a single, unsegmented network. While a more powerful firewall might offer enhanced features, it does not mitigate the risk of a single breach compromising the entire network. This failure to segment the network leaves sensitive data vulnerable and increases the potential impact of any security incident, contravening the FCA's principles of treating customers fairly and maintaining market integrity, which implicitly require robust data protection. Another incorrect approach would be to implement IDS/IPS without network segmentation. While IDS/IPS can detect and prevent some threats, without segmentation, successful intrusion could still grant attackers access to all network segments, including highly sensitive data. This approach lacks the architectural resilience necessary to contain breaches effectively and would likely be viewed as insufficient by regulatory bodies concerned with the overall security posture of a financial institution. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to prioritize cost savings by deferring the implementation of advanced network security measures, such as segmentation and IDS/IPS, in favor of less comprehensive solutions. This demonstrates a disregard for the potential financial and reputational damage resulting from a security breach, as well as a failure to meet the due diligence expected under the FCA handbook and the UK GDPR. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a thorough risk assessment that identifies critical assets and potential threats. This assessment should then inform the selection of security controls that are proportionate to the risks, considering both technical effectiveness and regulatory compliance. A defense-in-depth strategy, incorporating multiple layers of security controls and architectural resilience, is generally the most effective and professionally sound approach. Professionals must also consider the ongoing monitoring and maintenance of these controls to ensure their continued effectiveness. Question 2. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of an organization's operational resilience. Following a recent cyber incident that disrupted a key customer service platform, the Chief Information Officer, CIO, has tasked the security management team with updating the Business Impact Analysis, BIA. CIO has emphasized the need for swift action to define recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO, for all critical business functions. The security management team is considering several approaches to achieve this. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of a robust business impact analysis and regulatory expectations for operational resilience in the UK financial services sector? Option A. Rely on the IT department's existing estimates for system recovery capabilities and set RTOs and RPOs based on these technical limitations without further business validation. Option B. Benchmark RTOs and RPOs against those of similar organizations in the industry and adopt their stated recovery objectives for comparable functions. Option C. Conduct interviews with business unit heads to understand the impact of downtime on their operations, including financial, reputational, and regulatory consequences, and collaboratively define RTOs and RPOs based on this impact and relevant regulatory guidance. Option D. Prioritize the functions that have been most vocal in expressing concerns about the recent incident and assign RTOs and RPOs based on the perceived urgency from these stakeholders. The correct answer is C. Conduct interviews with business unit heads to understand the impact of downtime on their operations, including financial, reputational, and regulatory consequences, and collaboratively define RTOs and RPOs based on this impact and relevant regulatory guidance. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in business continuity planning, balancing the urgency of recovery with the practicalities of resource allocation and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in accurately identifying critical business functions and their associated recovery objectives without succumbing to internal pressures or making assumptions that could lead to non-compliance or operational failure. A robust business impact analysis, BIA, is foundational to effective business continuity and disaster recovery, directly informing the development of realistic and compliant recovery strategies. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven BIA process. This entails engaging with business unit leaders to understand their operational dependencies, the impact of downtime on revenue, reputation, and regulatory standing, and to collaboratively define realistic recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO. This collaborative and evidence-based method ensures that the defined objectives are achievable, aligned with business needs, and meet regulatory expectations for resilience and data integrity. For example, in the UK, regulations like the PRA Rulebook and FCA Handbook, along with guidance from bodies like the National Cybersecurity Center, NCSC, emphasize the need for firms to maintain operational resilience and manage risks effectively, which necessitates a thorough BIA. Defining RTOs and RPOs based on actual business impact and regulatory requirements, rather than arbitrary targets or perceived urgency, is crucial for demonstrating due diligence and compliance. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on IT department estimates for recovery times without validating them with business unit impact assessments. This fails to capture the full business impact of downtime, potentially leading to RTOs that are too long to prevent significant financial or reputational damage, or RPOs that are too lenient, risking unacceptable data loss. This approach also neglects the broader regulatory implications beyond IT, such as those related to customer data protection and financial reporting. Another incorrect approach is to set RTOs and RPOs based on competitor capabilities or industry best practices without a specific analysis of the organization's own critical functions and their unique impact. While benchmarking can be useful, it does not substitute for a tailored BIA that considers the specific risks and dependencies of the organization. This can lead to objectives that are either overly ambitious and unachievable or insufficient to meet regulatory obligations. Finally, prioritizing recovery based on the loudest voice or perceived urgency from senior management without a structured BIA is a significant failure. This subjective approach bypasses the objective assessment of criticality and impact, leading to misallocation of resources and potentially overlooking functions that are critical from a regulatory or financial perspective, but may not have vocal advocates. This can result in noncompliance with regulations that mandate specific recovery capabilities for certain functions. The professional decision-making process should involve initiating a formal BIA, establishing clear project governance, engaging cross-functional teams, utilizing standardized methodologies for impact assessment, and documenting all assumptions and findings. This structured approach ensures that recovery objectives are derived from a comprehensive understanding of business criticality and regulatory requirements, fostering a resilient and compliant organization. Question 3. Investigation of how a proposed cybersecurity framework implementation will impact the organization's ability to rapidly deploy new digital services and expand into emerging markets, focusing on identifying potential friction points and opportunities for security to act as a catalyst for innovation. Option A. Focus solely on compliance with minimum regulatory requirements, assuming that adherence to these standards will inherently support business growth and innovation without further analysis. Option B. Prioritize cost reduction by scaling back existing security measures and deferring the implementation of new controls until a significant security breach necessitates immediate action. Option C. Implement the most technically advanced and restrictive security controls available to ensure maximum protection against all conceivable threats, regardless of their impact on operational speed or business agility. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive business impact assessment that quantifies the potential effects of the framework on development cycles, time to market for new products, and the agility of operational processes, while also identifying how specific security controls can be integrated to enhance trust and enable secure expansion into new territories. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive business impact assessment that quantifies the potential effects of the framework on development cycles, time to market for new products, and the agility of operational processes, while also identifying how specific security controls can be integrated to enhance trust and enable secure expansion into new territories. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security professional to balance the imperative of robust security measures with the strategic goal of fostering business innovation and growth. The challenge lies in identifying security approaches that are not merely defensive but actively contribute to the business's ability to adapt, develop new products or services, and expand its market reach. A failure to align security with business enablement can lead to missed opportunities, stifled creativity, and a perception of security as a cost center rather than a strategic asset. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that demonstrably supports these business objectives while maintaining an appropriate risk posture. The correct approach involves conducting a proactive security impact assessment that specifically evaluates how proposed security enhancements will affect the speed of innovation, the ability to launch new products, and the overall agility of business operations. This assessment should identify potential friction points and, crucially, propose mitigation strategies that integrate security controls in a way that minimizes disruption and, where possible, enhances operational efficiency or enables new business models. This aligns with the principles of security as a business enabler, where security is designed to facilitate, rather than hinder, business objectives. From a regulatory perspective, while specific UK/CISI guidelines may not explicitly mandate this proactive impact assessment for business enablement, the overarching principles of good governance, risk management, and the duty of care inherent in professional security practice demand such a forward-thinking approach. It supports the business's strategic goals, which is a fundamental ethical responsibility for any professional advising on security. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on implementing the most stringent security controls without considering their business impact fails to recognize security's role as a business enabler. This can lead to over-securitization, which increases costs, slows down processes, and can alienate users, thereby hindering innovation and growth. Ethically, this approach neglects the professional duty to act in the best interests of the organization, which includes its commercial success. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings by reducing security investments, even if it means accepting higher risks, is also professionally unacceptable. While cost efficiency is important, a security professional has a duty to advise on appropriate risk levels. Undermining security to achieve short-term financial gains can expose the business to significant long-term financial and reputational damage, violating the principle of prudent risk management and potentially breaching regulatory requirements related to data protection and operational resilience. A further incorrect approach that involves delaying security enhancements until a significant security incident occurs demonstrates a reactive, rather than proactive stance. This not only increases the likelihood and impact of such incidents, but also signifies a failure to integrate security into the business's strategic planning and operational processes. It is a dereliction of professional duty to wait for a crisis before addressing known vulnerabilities or implementing necessary security measures that could have prevented business disruption and supported ongoing operations and innovation. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the business's strategic objectives, risk appetite, and operational realities. Security professionals must engage in continuous dialogue with business stakeholders to identify how security can be leveraged to achieve these objectives. This involves moving beyond a purely defensive mindset to one that actively seeks opportunities to enhance business resilience, facilitate secure innovation, and build trust with customers and partners. The process should include a structured impact assessment that quantifies the potential benefits and drawbacks of security initiatives on business operations, innovation, and growth, ensuring that security investments are aligned with and contribute to the overall success of the organization. Question 4. Compliance review shows that a critical security system is exhibiting intermittent failures, potentially exposing sensitive data. The security manager has received preliminary reports suggesting a specific vendor's patch might be the cause, but full diagnostic data is not yet available. The operational team is pushing for an immediate rollback to the previous stable version to ensure system uptime, while the IT security team advises caution, suggesting a more thorough analysis before any changes are made. The security manager must decide on the immediate course of action. Option A. Initiate a controlled rollback to the previous stable version of the security system, while simultaneously commencing a detailed forensic analysis of the patch and its impact. Option B. Authorize the operational team to implement their proposed rollback without further investigation, prioritizing system uptime above all else. Option C. Immediately deploy a temporary, less secure workaround to maintain system availability, deferring any patch analysis or rollback until the operational pressure subsides. Option D. Instruct the IT security team to proceed with a full diagnostic analysis of the patch and its potential impact, and await their complete findings before any action is taken on the system. The correct answer is A. Initiate a controlled rollback to the previous stable version of the security system, while simultaneously commencing a detailed forensic analysis of the patch and its impact. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term imperative of robust risk management, all within a specific regulatory context. The security manager must make a decision that is not only effective in the short term, but also compliant with established frameworks and ethical standards, avoiding the temptation of expediency over due diligence. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate decision-making framework when faced with incomplete information and potential pressure to act quickly. The correct approach involves a structured, evidence-based decision-making process that prioritizes thorough risk assessment and mitigation planning before implementation. This aligns with the principles of proactive risk management mandated by regulatory bodies, which emphasize understanding potential threats, vulnerabilities, and their impact. By engaging stakeholders and seeking expert advice, the security manager ensures that the chosen solution is comprehensive, sustainable, and defensible. This methodical approach minimizes the likelihood of unforeseen consequences and demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and best practices in security management. An incorrect approach would be to implement a solution based solely on anecdotal evidence or the perceived urgency of the situation, without a formal risk assessment. This bypasses critical steps in the risk management process, potentially leading to the adoption of ineffective or even counterproductive measures. Such an approach risks regulatory noncompliance, as it fails to demonstrate due diligence in identifying and mitigating risks. Furthermore, it can erode trust with stakeholders and create a precedent for reactive, rather than proactive, security management. Another incorrect approach would be to defer the decision entirely to a less experienced team member without adequate oversight or guidance. While delegation is important, critical risk management decisions require experienced judgment and a comprehensive understanding of the regulatory landscape. This abdication of responsibility can lead to poor decision-making, missed risks, and a failure to meet organizational security objectives, potentially resulting in significant security breaches and regulatory penalties. Finally, an approach that prioritizes cost savings over the effectiveness of the risk mitigation strategy is also professionally unsound. While budget constraints are a reality, security is not an area where corners can be cut without significant potential repercussions. Regulatory frameworks often require that security measures be proportionate to the identified risks, implying that the most cost-effective solution is not necessarily the cheapest, but the one that provides the most effective risk reduction for the investment. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes clearly defining the problem and its scope, gathering relevant information and data, identifying and evaluating potential solutions, including their risks and benefits, consulting with relevant stakeholders and experts, selecting the most appropriate solution based on a comprehensive assessment, developing an implementation plan, and establishing mechanisms for monitoring and review. This iterative process ensures that decisions are well-informed, compliant, and aligned with organizational security objectives. Question 5. Market research demonstrates that organizations often struggle to effectively identify and remediate system, network, and process weaknesses due to resource constraints and the sheer volume of potential vulnerabilities. As a security management professional, you are tasked with designing a vulnerability assessment program. Which of the following approaches best balances thoroughness with efficiency and aligns with professional best practices for managing organizational risk? Option A. Implement a continuous automated scanning program across all network segments and systems, prioritizing remediation based solely on the number of vulnerabilities detected by the tools. Option B. Develop a phased, risk-based vulnerability assessment strategy that prioritizes critical assets and business processes, utilizes a combination of automated and manual techniques, and incorporates threat intelligence to inform the scope and depth of assessments. Option C. Outsource all vulnerability assessment activities to a third-party vendor without establishing clear internal oversight or defining specific organizational risk tolerance levels. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive, manual penetration test of every application and infrastructure component annually, focusing on the most technically sophisticated attack vectors. The correct answer is A. Implement a continuous automated scanning program across all network segments and systems, prioritizing remediation based solely on the number of vulnerabilities detected by the tools. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because a security manager must balance the need for comprehensive vulnerability assessment with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the potential for disruption. The effectiveness of a vulnerability assessment program hinges on its ability to accurately identify weaknesses without causing undue operational impact or generating an overwhelming volume of actionable data. Careful judgment is required to select the most appropriate methodology that aligns with the organization's risk appetite, regulatory obligations, and business objectives. The correct approach involves a phased, risk-based methodology that prioritizes critical assets and known threat vectors. This approach ensures that resources are focused on the most significant vulnerabilities, providing the greatest return on investment in terms of risk reduction. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and prudent risk management expected under general security management professional standards, which implicitly require a systematic and proportionate response to identified threats. While specific regulations for the security management professional (SMP) exam jurisdiction are not explicitly stated, professional ethical codes and best practices universally advocate for a risk-informed approach to security, emphasizing efficiency and effectiveness. An approach that focuses solely on the most technically complex vulnerabilities, regardless of their potential impact or exploitability, is incorrect. This fails to prioritize effectively and can lead to wasted resources on issues that pose minimal actual risk to the organization. It also neglects the importance of assessing process and human vulnerabilities, which are often as critical as technical ones. An approach that relies exclusively on automated scanning tools without manual validation or contextual analysis is also incorrect. Automated tools can generate false positives and miss nuanced vulnerabilities that require human expertise to identify. This can lead to an incomplete or inaccurate picture of the organization's security posture, failing to meet the standard of thoroughness expected in a professional assessment. Finally, an approach that attempts to assess every single system and network component simultaneously, without regard for criticality or resource limitations, is professionally unsound. This shotgun approach is inefficient, likely to overwhelm the assessment team, and may result in superficial analysis rather than deep, meaningful identification of critical weaknesses. It demonstrates a lack of strategic planning and resource management, which are core competencies for a security professional. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured process. First, understanding the organization's critical assets and business processes. Second, identifying relevant threat landscapes and regulatory requirements. Third, evaluating various assessment methodologies based on their strengths, weaknesses, cost, and potential impact. And finally, selecting and implementing a phased, risk-based approach that allows for continuous improvement and adaptation. Question 6. When evaluating a potential data breach involving unauthorized access to sensitive employee information and needing to investigate the scope and origin of the incident, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with data protection regulations and maintain employee trust? Option A. Immediately access all relevant employee digital records and communication logs to identify the source and extent of the breach, informing employees only after the investigation is complete. Option B. Restrict access to all employee data and communication logs until a formal legal order is obtained, even if the security incident is ongoing and poses an immediate risk. Option C. Initiate a targeted investigation by accessing only the minimum necessary employee data and communication logs required to understand the breach, while simultaneously working to obtain consent or establishing a clear legal basis for access, and informing affected employees as soon as legally permissible. Option D. Seek explicit consent from each affected employee before accessing any of their personal data or communication logs, even if this delays the investigation and potentially allows the breach to spread. The correct answer is A. Immediately access all relevant employee digital records and communication logs to identify the source and extent of the breach, informing employees only after the investigation is complete. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the fundamental right to privacy and the legal obligations to protect sensitive data. A security professional must navigate the complexities of data access, consent, and the potential for misuse, all within the strict confines of the relevant regulatory framework. The core tension lies in the potential for a security incident to escalate if not investigated promptly, versus the imperative to adhere to data protection laws and ethical principles. The correct approach involves a structured, legally compliant investigation that prioritizes data minimization and consent where feasible. This approach acknowledges that while a security breach is a serious concern, the methods used to investigate must not themselves violate privacy rights or legal statutes. Obtaining explicit consent from the affected individuals before accessing their personal data, or at least demonstrating a clear legal basis for such access, e.g., legitimate interest with appropriate safeguards or a court order if necessary, is paramount. This aligns with principles of data protection by design and by default, ensuring that privacy is considered at every stage of the security management process. An incorrect approach that involves broad, unfettered access to all employee data without explicit consent or a clear legal justification fails to uphold data protection principles. This could lead to regulatory penalties for privacy violations, damage to employee trust, and potential legal challenges. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying the investigation significantly to obtain consent for every minor data access, could exacerbate the security risk and potentially lead to further compromise or loss of critical evidence, demonstrating a failure to adequately balance security needs with privacy rights. A third incorrect approach, which involves sharing the access data with unauthorized personnel or using it for purposes beyond the immediate security investigation, constitutes a severe breach of confidentiality and privacy, leading to significant legal and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the specific security threat and its potential impact. This should be followed by a thorough review of the applicable regulatory framework to determine the legal boundaries for data access and investigation. The next step is to identify the minimum data necessary for the investigation and explore all options for obtaining consent or establishing a legal basis for access. If consent cannot be obtained and a legal basis is unclear, seeking legal counsel is essential. Throughout the process, data minimization, purpose limitation, and transparency, where appropriate and legally permissible, should be guiding principles. Question 7. Process analysis reveals that a critical customer database was recently compromised due to a sophisticated phishing attack that exploited an unpatched vulnerability in a web application. The immediate business priority is to restore full database functionality and customer access as quickly as possible. The security team is considering several remediation strategies. Which strategy best aligns with the regulatory framework for managing information security risks and ensuring the resilience of systems? Option A. Immediately restore the database from a backup and deploy generic security patches to all web applications to prevent future similar attacks. Option B. Implement a broad network-wide security lockdown to prevent any further external access to the network while the database is being restored. Option C. Focus solely on restoring the database to its pre-compromised state and expedite customer access, deferring any in-depth security analysis until after normal operations have resumed. Option D. Conduct a detailed threat model of the compromised web application and the specific phishing attack vector to identify all potential vulnerabilities and attack paths. Then implement targeted security controls and patch the identified vulnerability. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed threat model of the compromised web application and the specific phishing attack vector to identify all potential vulnerabilities and attack paths. Then implement targeted security controls and patch the identified vulnerability. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security manager to balance the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term imperative of robust security posture. The pressure to restore services quickly can lead to shortcuts that introduce significant, unaddressed vulnerabilities. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the remediation efforts are thorough and aligned with regulatory requirements, rather than merely superficial fixes. The correct approach involves a systematic threat modeling exercise specifically tailored to the incident's root cause and the affected systems. This approach is right because it directly addresses the identified vulnerabilities and potential attack vectors that led to the incident. By understanding the threat landscape and how it was exploited, the security team can implement targeted controls that are both effective and proportionate. This aligns with the principles of risk management mandated by regulatory frameworks such as the UK's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and the Network and Information Systems Regulations, NIS regulations, which require organizations to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to manage risks to information security and ensure the resilience of essential services. A thorough threat model provides the necessary justification for these measures. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on restoring the compromised system without understanding the underlying vulnerability fails to address the root cause. This is a regulatory failure because it neglects the obligation to implement appropriate security measures to prevent recurrence, as stipulated by data protection and cybersecurity laws. It also represents an ethical failure to adequately protect the organization and its stakeholders from future harm. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing generic security patches without a specific threat assessment is also professionally unacceptable. While patching is important, a scattergun approach can be inefficient and may not address the specific threat vectors that were exploited. This can lead to a false sense of security, leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed, which is a failure to meet the due diligence expected under regulatory frameworks. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of restoration over thoroughness leading to the deployment of systems with known, unmitigated vulnerabilities, is a direct contravention of the principles of security by design and by default, as well as the requirement for ongoing risk assessment and management. This approach creates a significant compliance risk and exposes the organization to further breaches. Professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured incident response and recovery plan that mandates a post-incident threat assessment. This assessment should inform the remediation strategy, ensuring that controls are implemented based on a clear understanding of threats, vulnerabilities, and attack vectors. Professionals should always ask, what was the attack? How did it succeed? And what specific measures are needed to prevent it from succeeding again, in accordance with our regulatory obligations. This systematic approach ensures that recovery efforts contribute to a stronger, more resilient security posture. Question 8. Analysis of a security company's deployment of newly hired security guards to a high-profile client site, where the guards have provided certificates of training completion, but the company has not independently verified the accreditation of the training provider, or established a formal supervision schedule for the initial deployment period, raises questions regarding adherence to regulatory frameworks governing private security operations. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with the relevant regulatory framework and professional standards for security guard operations? Option A. Conduct a thorough verification of the training provider's accreditation against the requirements of the relevant regulatory body and establish a structured supervision and performance review plan for the initial deployment period. Option B. Proceed with deployment, but inform the client that the company's verification processes for training accreditation are currently under review. Option C. Rely on the guard's self-assessment of their skills and experience, assuming their previous employers provided adequate training. Option D. Immediately deploy the guards to the client site as their certificates appear valid, and implement supervision only if performance issues arise. The correct answer is D. Immediately deploy the guards to the client site as their certificates appear valid, and implement supervision only if performance issues arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security management, ensuring that deployed personnel are adequately trained and supervised to meet operational requirements and regulatory standards. The professional challenge lies in balancing operational demands with the imperative to uphold legal and ethical obligations regarding staff competency and oversight. Failure to do so can lead to breaches of security, reputational damage, and legal liabilities. The correct approach involves a proactive and documented system for verifying security guard training against specific regulatory requirements and establishing clear lines of supervision with regular performance reviews. This ensures that guards possess the necessary skills and knowledge to perform their duties effectively and safely, thereby complying with the relevant regulatory framework. For instance, in the UK, the Private Security Industry Act 2001, as amended, and the Security Industry Authority, JA licensing requirements mandate specific training and qualifications for individuals undertaking licensable activities. A robust supervision framework, often guided by best practices outlined by professional bodies like ACES International, further reinforces accountability and operational effectiveness. This approach directly addresses the regulatory obligation to ensure personnel are competent and supervised, minimizing risks and upholding professional standards. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the security guard's self-declaration of training without verification fails to meet regulatory obligations. JA, for example, requires proof of accredited training for licensing. Without this verification, the security company is operating in contravention of the law, potentially exposing itself to fines and license revocation. Another incorrect approach, which involves deploying guards without a clear supervision structure or performance monitoring, neglects the duty of care and operational oversight. This can lead to untrained or poorly performing guards making critical errors, which could have severe consequences. Regulatory bodies and industry best practices emphasize the importance of ongoing supervision and performance management to ensure continued competence and adherence to protocols. A further incorrect approach, focusing only on the immediate operational need without considering the long-term implications of inadequate training or supervision, demonstrates a short-sighted and potentially negligent management style. This can result in a cycle of poor performance, increased risk, and potential regulatory sanctions. Professionals must adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes compliance, risk mitigation, and the development of a competent and well-supervised security team, aligning with both legal mandates and ethical responsibilities. Question 9. The efficiency study reveals that the security department's budget is being scrutinized for potential reductions. The Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, is tasked with justifying the current security expenditure and demonstrating its alignment with the company's overarching strategic objectives for the next fiscal year, which include expanding into new international markets and launching a new digital product line. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates the security department's strategic value and ensures continued support for its initiatives? Option A. Focusing on achieving and maintaining compliance with all relevant industry regulations and data privacy laws, presenting a checklist of completed compliance activities as evidence of security effectiveness. Option B. Proposing a significant increase in security technology investments, emphasizing the need for cutting-edge solutions to combat evolving cyber threats, without explicitly linking these investments to specific business outcomes. Option C. Developing a comprehensive security roadmap that directly maps security initiatives to specific business objectives, such as market expansion and new product development, outlining the associated risks and proposed mitigation strategies. Option D. Presenting a detailed report on the number of security incidents prevented and the technical vulnerabilities remediated over the past year, highlighting the cost savings achieved by avoiding potential breaches. The correct answer is D. Presenting a detailed report on the number of security incidents prevented and the technical vulnerabilities remediated over the past year, highlighting the cost savings achieved by avoiding potential breaches. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security management, balancing proactive strategic alignment with reactive operational demands. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that security initiatives are not merely a cost center or a compliance hurdle, but a genuine enabler of the organization's strategic goals. This requires a deep understanding of the business, its objectives, and its tolerance for risk, which can be difficult to achieve when security teams are often perceived as solely focused on threat mitigation. Careful judgment is required to prioritize initiatives that offer the greatest strategic value while still addressing essential security needs. The correct approach involves integrating security planning directly into the organization's strategic planning process. This means security goals are derived from and explicitly support business objectives, and the security risk appetite is clearly defined and understood by senior leadership. This alignment ensures that security investments are justified by their contribution to business success, rather than being seen as an overhead. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data protection and corporate governance, often mandate or strongly encourage such alignment to ensure that risks are managed in a way that supports the organization's overall mission and legal obligations. For example, the UK's Corporate Governance Code emphasizes the importance of board oversight of risk management, which inherently requires security considerations to be embedded within strategic decision-making. An incorrect approach would be to develop security strategies in isolation from business objectives. This often leads to security measures that are either insufficient to protect critical business assets or overly burdensome and costly, hindering operational efficiency. Such an approach fails to demonstrate the value of security to the wider organization and can result in a disconnect between security priorities and business priorities, potentially leading to non-compliance with risk management expectations. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on meeting minimum regulatory compliance requirements without considering the broader strategic implications. While compliance is essential, it represents a baseline and does not necessarily equate to effective risk management or strategic advantage. Organizations that only aim for compliance may find themselves vulnerable to emerging threats or unable to capitalize on opportunities due to inadequate security. This can lead to reputational damage and financial loss, which are contrary to strategic objectives. A third incorrect approach is to treat security as a purely technical function, divorced from business context. This overlooks the fact that security threats often target business processes and data, and that security solutions must be tailored to the specific operational environment and business needs. Without this business context, security measures may be misapplied, ineffective, or create unnecessary friction. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a continuous dialogue between security leadership and business stakeholders. This dialogue should focus on understanding business objectives, identifying key risks to those objectives, and collaboratively developing security strategies that mitigate those risks while enabling business growth. Security professionals should actively participate in strategic planning sessions, articulate security risks in business terms, and demonstrate how security investments contribute to achieving strategic goals. This proactive and integrated approach ensures that security is a strategic partner, not just a compliance function. Question 10. System analysis indicates a proposal to implement advanced CCTV with integrated video analytics across a retail environment to enhance loss prevention and customer flow management. The proposed analytics include facial recognition for identifying known shoplifters and tracking customer movement patterns to optimize store layout. What is the most appropriate initial step for the security management professional to ensure compliance with UK regulatory frameworks? Option A. Immediately deploy the system with minimal signage, assuming that the public nature of the retail environment implies consent to surveillance. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, to evaluate the necessity, proportionality, and potential risks to individuals' privacy associated with the proposed system. Option C. Proceed with the installation and configuration of the CCTV and video analytics system, focusing on optimizing its technical performance for security objectives. Option D. Prioritize the acquisition of the most sophisticated video analytics software available, regardless of its specific alignment with stated security objectives. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the installation and configuration of the CCTV and video analytics system, focusing on optimizing its technical performance for security objectives. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the operational benefits of advanced surveillance technology with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding data privacy and its use. Security management professional, SMP, must navigate the complexities of implementing CCTV and video analytics in a manner that is both effective for security and compliant with the relevant regulatory framework. The challenge lies in ensuring that the deployment and operation of these systems do not infringe upon individual rights or contravene established legal standards, particularly concerning data retention, access, and purpose limitation. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the proposed CCTV and video analytics deployment against the specific requirements of the UK's data protection legislation, primarily the UK GDPR and the Data Protection Act 2018. This includes conducting a data protection impact assessment, DPIA, to identify and mitigate privacy risks, ensuring that the processing of personal data captured by the CCTV system is lawful, fair, and transparent, and that the analytics are used for specified, explicit, and legitimate purposes. The system must be configured to collect only the data necessary for these purposes, with appropriate security measures to protect it. Furthermore, clear policies on data retention, access controls, and individual rights, such as the right to access or erasure, must be established and communicated. This approach is justified by the legal imperative to comply with data protection principles, which mandate a risk-based approach to processing personal data and require organizations to demonstrate accountability for their data processing activities. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the operational security benefits without considering data protection implications fails to meet the legal requirements. This would be a regulatory failure under the UK GDPR, as it overlooks the obligation to process personal data lawfully and fairly. Implementing video analytics for broad, undefined security monitoring without a clear purpose limitation would also be a breach of data protection principles. Another incorrect approach, which involves deploying the system with minimal consideration for data security and access controls, would violate the security principle of the UK GDPR, potentially leading to unauthorized access or disclosure of personal data. This could result in significant reputational damage and regulatory penalties. A further incorrect approach, such as failing to inform individuals about the presence and purpose of the CCTV system through clear signage, would contravene the transparency principle of the UK GDPR. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a thorough understanding of the applicable legal and regulatory landscape. This involves proactively identifying potential privacy risks associated with new technologies, conducting impact assessments, and embedding data protection by design and by default. The framework should also include robust governance mechanisms for the ongoing management and oversight of surveillance systems, ensuring that their use remains compliant and ethically sound throughout their lifecycle. Question 11. Research into the implementation of advanced endpoint security solutions within a regulated industry has revealed a critical need to balance comprehensive threat detection and data protection with operational continuity and user adoption. The organization is evaluating several approaches to deploy a new endpoint security platform that includes antivirus, endpoint detection and response, (EDR), and data loss prevention, (DLP) capabilities. Which of the following implementation strategies best aligns with regulatory requirements and professional best practices for managing such a critical security enhancement? Option A. Immediate organization-wide deployment of the most feature-rich EDR solution available with minimal user training, assuming that advanced security features will automatically deter misuse and ensure compliance. Option B. Implementing a custom-built endpoint security solution requiring significant in-house development, with the expectation that it will perfectly tailor to the organization's unique needs, without a formal pilot phase or extensive user testing. Option C. A phased deployment starting with a pilot group of technically proficient users in a non-critical department, followed by gradual expansion to other departments based on feedback and performance metrics, accompanied by comprehensive user training and clear communication channels for support and issue reporting. Option D. Prioritizing the selection of the least expensive antivirus software that meets basic malware detection requirements, with plans to add EDR and DLP functionalities only if specific security incidents occur to manage initial costs. The correct answer is C. A phased deployment starting with a pilot group of technically proficient users in a non-critical department, followed by gradual expansion to other departments based on feedback and performance metrics, accompanied by comprehensive user training and clear communication channels for support and issue reporting. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in endpoint security, where the need to balance robust protection with operational efficiency and user experience is paramount. The professional challenge lies in selecting an endpoint security solution that not only meets stringent regulatory compliance requirements, but also minimizes disruption to business operations and avoids creating undue burdens on end users. A hasty or poorly considered decision can lead to significant security vulnerabilities, compliance failures, and employee dissatisfaction, all of which have direct financial and reputational consequences. Careful judgment is required to assess the technical capabilities, integration requirements, management overhead, and potential impact on productivity of various endpoint security solutions. The correct approach involves a phased deployment strategy that prioritizes critical assets and user groups, coupled with comprehensive user training and a clear communication plan. This method allows for early identification and remediation of any unforeseen issues, ensuring that the chosen solution effectively addresses the organization's security posture without causing widespread disruption. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data protection, e.g., GDPR if the jurisdiction were EU, or equivalent data privacy laws in other specified jurisdictions, mandate that organizations implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect personal data. An EDR solution, when properly implemented, contributes to this by providing visibility into endpoint activities, detecting and responding to threats, and potentially preventing data exfiltration, thereby supporting compliance with data protection obligations. Furthermore, ethical considerations dictate that organizations should not compromise employee productivity unnecessarily and should provide adequate support during technology transitions. An approach that focuses solely on the most advanced EDR features without considering integration or user impact is incorrect because it risks overwhelming IT resources and alienating users, potentially leading to workarounds that bypass security controls. This could result in compliance failures if sensitive data is subsequently compromised due to user-driven security circumvention. Similarly, an approach that prioritizes cost savings by selecting a basic antivirus solution that lacks EDR capabilities or robust DLP features is incorrect. Such a choice would likely fail to meet the evolving threat landscape and regulatory expectations for comprehensive endpoint protection, leaving the organization vulnerable to sophisticated attacks and data breaches, thereby violating the appropriate technical and organizational measures requirement of many data protection regulations. Opting for a solution that requires extensive custom development without a clear ROI or a robust support plan is also professionally unsound. It introduces significant project risk, potential for delays, and may not align with long-term security strategy or regulatory mandates for maintainable and auditable security controls. A professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, a clear understanding of regulatory requirements, and a pilot testing phase. Organizations should define their specific security objectives and compliance obligations first, then evaluate potential solutions against these criteria. Engaging stakeholders, including IT, security, legal, and end-user representatives, early in the process is crucial for gathering diverse perspectives and ensuring buy-in. A phased rollout, starting with a small representative group, allows for real-world testing and refinement before a full-scale deployment. This iterative approach, grounded in risk management and compliance, ensures that the chosen endpoint security solution is both effective and practical. Question 12. The control framework reveals that the organization has identified several potential information security risks. As the security management professional, which approach to addressing these risks would be most aligned with a robust, compliant, and efficient security program? Option A. Immediately implement all identified security controls to ensure maximum protection against all potential threats, regardless of their assessed likelihood or impact. Option B. Rely on the subjective judgment of senior IT staff to determine which risks are most significant and require immediate attention. Option C. Focus exclusively on addressing the most technically complex vulnerabilities identified, as these are often the most critical to resolve. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies threats, vulnerabilities, likelihood, and impact. Then prioritize mitigation strategies based on the assessed risk levels and the organization's risk appetite, ensuring alignment with relevant regulatory requirements. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies threats, vulnerabilities, likelihood, and impact. Then prioritize mitigation strategies based on the assessed risk levels and the organization's risk appetite, ensuring alignment with relevant regulatory requirements. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in information security management, balancing the need for robust risk assessment with the practical constraints of resource allocation and operational impact. A security professional must not only identify potential threats and vulnerabilities, but also prioritize mitigation efforts based on their potential impact and likelihood, all while adhering to relevant regulatory requirements. The challenge lies in making informed decisions that protect sensitive information without unduly hindering business operations or exceeding budgetary limitations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the risk assessment process is both effective and efficient, leading to a security posture that is proportionate to the identified risks. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of identifying, analyzing, and evaluating risks to information assets. This typically includes defining the scope of the assessment, identifying threats and vulnerabilities, analyzing the likelihood and impact of potential incidents, and determining the level of risk. Based on this evaluation, appropriate controls are then selected and implemented to mitigate risks to an acceptable level, aligning with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. This approach ensures that security investments are targeted towards the most critical areas, providing a defensible rationale for decisions and demonstrating compliance with standards such as ISO 27001, which mandates a risk-based approach to information security management. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical vulnerabilities without considering business impact fails to provide a holistic view of risk. This can lead to misallocation of resources, addressing minor technical issues while overlooking significant business risks. It also neglects the regulatory requirement to protect information based on its sensitivity and the potential harm from its compromise, not just its technical exposure. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the implementation of every identified control without a risk-based evaluation is inefficient and costly. It can lead to an overly complex security environment that is difficult to manage and may not effectively address the most significant threats. This approach lacks the strategic focus required by regulatory frameworks that emphasize proportionality and effectiveness in risk mitigation. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal opinion rather than a structured assessment process is inherently subjective and unreliable. This can result in biased risk evaluations and the implementation of controls that are not aligned with actual threats or regulatory requirements, undermining the credibility of the security program. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with understanding the organization's business objectives and regulatory landscape. This is followed by a comprehensive risk assessment process that quantifies or qualitatively assesses risks. The results of the assessment then inform the selection and prioritization of security controls, ensuring that they are aligned with the organization's risk appetite and compliance obligations. Regular review and updates to the risk assessment are crucial to maintain an effective security posture. Question 13. Comparative studies suggest that while various security lighting technologies exist, their effectiveness in deterring and detecting intruders can vary significantly based on placement and type. A security manager is tasked with upgrading the external lighting for a high-risk retail premises in the UK, operating under the Security Industry Authority, a regulatory framework. The budget is a consideration, but the primary objective is to ensure compliance with SIA expectations for effective security provision. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the SIA's regulatory framework for security lighting deployment? Option A. Prioritize lighting fixtures that offer the most aesthetically pleasing illumination, ensuring the premises' appearance is enhanced, and then select a lighting level that is considered adequate without a detailed risk assessment or specific performance evaluation. Option B. Install the brightest available lighting system, regardless of type or placement, to maximize visibility and assume this will automatically deter all potential intruders. Option C. Select the most cost-effective LED floodlights available and install them at regular intervals around the perimeter, prioritizing ease of installation over precise coverage analysis. Option D. Conduct a thorough site-specific risk assessment to identify critical vulnerabilities and potential intrusion points, then specify and place lighting types e.g. high-intensity discharge, LED, low-pressure sodium, and luminaires that demonstrably address these risks, ensuring adequate illumination levels and coverage as per industry best practices and regulatory guidance for deterring and detecting threats. The correct answer is C. Select the most cost-effective LED floodlights available and install them at regular intervals around the perimeter, prioritizing ease of installation over precise coverage analysis. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security management, balancing cost-effectiveness with the mandated effectiveness of security measures. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the relevant regulatory framework to a practical security deployment, ensuring that the chosen lighting solution meets both the spirit and the letter of the law, while also being financially responsible. A security manager must demonstrate a thorough understanding of the regulatory requirements for security lighting, not just its technical specifications. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the site's specific risks and vulnerabilities, followed by the selection and placement of lighting types that demonstrably mitigate those risks according to the specified regulatory standards. This approach prioritizes compliance with the Security Industry Authority, licensing and regulatory framework, which mandates that security measures are effective and appropriate for the risks identified. The effectiveness of lighting is not merely about illumination levels, but about its ability to deter, detect, and delay threats, as implicitly required by the SIA's focus on competent and effective security provision. An approach that solely focuses on the lowest cost option without a thorough risk assessment or consideration of the specific performance characteristics of different lighting types fails to meet regulatory expectations. The SIA expects security professionals to implement solutions that are fit for purpose, choosing lighting based purely on initial purchase price, without evaluating its lumen output, beam spread, color rendering, and suitability for the intended coverage areas, risks creating blind spots or ineffective deterrence, thereby failing to provide adequate security as required by the SIA's overarching mandate for competent security operations. Another incorrect approach would be to select lighting based on outdated or generic industry best practices that do not align with current regulatory guidance or the specific threat profile of the site. Regulations evolve, and what was once considered adequate may no longer be sufficient. Relying on such practices without verifying their current applicability and effectiveness against the prevailing regulatory landscape represents a failure to exercise due diligence and professional judgment. Finally, an approach that prioritizes aesthetic considerations over security effectiveness is fundamentally flawed. While appearance can be a factor in some environments, the primary purpose of security lighting is to enhance safety and security. Any decision that compromises this primary objective in favor of visual appeal would be a direct contravention of the core principles of security management and the implicit requirements of the SIA's regulatory framework. Professionals should adopt a systematic decision-making process that begins with a detailed site risk assessment. This assessment should inform the selection of appropriate security measures, including lighting. The chosen lighting solution must then be evaluated against the specific requirements of the relevant regulatory framework, such as the SIA's guidelines on effective security provision. This involves understanding the technical specifications of different lighting types and how they contribute to deterrence, detection, and delay. Cost should be a secondary consideration, evaluated only after the effectiveness and compliance of potential solutions have been established. Regular review and evaluation of the deployed lighting system's performance are also crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 14. The assessment process reveals that the security awareness and training program has been implemented across the organization, with high completion rates for mandatory modules. However, senior management is questioning the tangible return on investment and the program's actual impact on reducing security risks. Which approach best demonstrates the program's effectiveness and justifies its continued investment? Option A. Compiling testimonials from a select group of employees who report feeling more aware of security threats after completing the training. Option B. Gathering feedback on employee engagement and satisfaction levels with the training materials and delivery methods. Option C. Quantifying the total number of training sessions delivered and the percentage of employees who have completed all assigned modules. Option D. Correlating a decrease in specific security incidents, such as successful phishing attempts and malware infections, with the rollout and ongoing enhancements of the security awareness and training program. High satisfaction does not automatically translate to improved security practices or a stronger security culture. This approach neglects the primary objective of security awareness training: to foster a security-conscious culture that actively mitigates threats. Relying on anecdotal evidence or testimonials from a few employees, while potentially illustrative, lacks the rigor and objectivity required for a comprehensive impact assessment. Such evidence is subjective and not scalable or representative of the entire organization's security posture. This approach is professionally weak as it does not provide the concrete, data-driven evidence needed to justify program effectiveness and resource allocation to stakeholders, nor does it meet the expectations of professional bodies for evidence-based security management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a data-driven approach to impact assessment. This involves establishing baseline metrics for key security incidents before training initiatives, implementing targeted training programs, and then tracking changes in these metrics post-training. The process should involve continuous monitoring and feedback loops to refine training content and delivery methods. When presenting findings, focus on the correlation between training efforts and demonstrable improvements in security posture, framed in terms of risk reduction and business value. This aligns with the principles of good governance and accountability expected within professional frameworks. Question 15. Regulatory review indicates that a critical business system is experiencing intermittent availability issues, impacting operational efficiency. A proposed quick-fix solution involves temporarily disabling certain access controls and data validation checks to allow users to bypass the bottlenecks. This solution is technically simple and can be implemented immediately. As the security management professional, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Focus solely on restoring availability and address potential security concerns after the system is stable. Option B. Implement the quick-fix solution immediately to restore system availability, as operational efficiency is the primary concern. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to evaluate the impact of the proposed solution on confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and explore alternative solutions that maintain all three tenets. Option D. Proceed with the quick-fix solution, but instruct users to exercise extreme caution when accessing and handling data. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to evaluate the impact of the proposed solution on confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and explore alternative solutions that maintain all three tenets. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in security management, balancing the need for operational efficiency with the fundamental security tenets of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate response when a proposed solution, while seemingly beneficial for availability, potentially compromises confidentiality and integrity, especially within a regulated environment. The pressure to deliver rapid solutions can lead to overlooking critical security implications, making careful judgment and adherence to established principles paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment that explicitly considers the impact on all three core security tenets. This approach is right because it aligns with the fundamental principles of information security and regulatory expectations. Confidentiality ensures that sensitive data is accessible only to authorized individuals. Integrity guarantees that data is accurate, complete, and has not been tampered with. Availability ensures that systems and data are accessible when needed by authorized users. A comprehensive risk assessment, as mandated by many regulatory frameworks, e.g., data protection laws, industry-specific regulations, requires evaluating potential threats and vulnerabilities against these tenets. By prioritizing a solution that upholds all three, the security professional demonstrates a commitment to robust security practices and regulatory compliance, preventing potential data breaches, unauthorized access, or data corruption. Incorrect approach is analysis. Prioritizing only the immediate availability of the system without a full assessment of the security implications is an incorrect approach. This failure directly contravenes the principle of confidentiality, as it may expose sensitive data to unauthorized access or disclosure if the proposed quick fix is not adequately secured. It also risks compromising integrity if the solution introduces vulnerabilities that could lead to data modification or corruption. Implementing a solution solely based on cost-effectiveness without a commensurate evaluation of its impact on confidentiality and integrity is also an incorrect approach. While cost is a factor, it cannot supersede the fundamental security requirements. This approach can lead to the adoption of insecure technologies or processes, creating significant long-term risks that far outweigh any initial cost savings. It demonstrates a disregard for the regulatory obligation to protect sensitive information and maintain system trustworthiness. Adopting a solution that is technically feasible and readily available without verifying its compliance with existing security policies and regulatory mandates is another incorrect approach. Technical feasibility does not equate to security or compliance. This approach bypasses the critical due diligence required to ensure that any new system or process integrates securely into the existing environment and adheres to legal and ethical obligations concerning data protection and system security. Professional reasoning. Security professionals must adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Identifying the security objectives, which are rooted in the CIA triad. 2. Recognizing potential threats and vulnerabilities associated with any proposed change or solution. 3. Assessing the impact of these threats and vulnerabilities on confidentiality, integrity, and availability. 4. Evaluating the likelihood of these impacts occurring. 5. Determining appropriate controls to mitigate identified risks to an acceptable level, ensuring compliance with relevant regulations and ethical standards. 6. Documenting the entire process and the rationale for the chosen solution. Question 16. Consider a scenario where a financial services firm, operating under UK regulatory guidelines, is tasked with enhancing its risk monitoring and reporting capabilities to ensure ongoing compliance with the Financial Conduct Authority's FCA principles for businesses, particularly Principle 8, risk management. The firm needs to implement a system that provides continuous oversight of its information security risks. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory expectations and professional best practices for effective risk monitoring and reporting in this context? Option A. Rely primarily on a reactive incident response log, documenting security breaches only after they occur, and provide quarterly summary reports to senior management that highlight the number of incidents without detailing underlying risk trends. Option B. Develop a broad set of general IT metrics, such as server uptime and network bandwidth, and present these monthly to the IT department, assuming that these indicators indirectly reflect the overall information security risk posture. Option C. Implement a system that defines specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, key risk indicators, CRI, directly linked to identified information security threats and vulnerabilities, and establish a tiered reporting structure that mandates immediate escalation of KRIs exceeding predefined thresholds to the Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, and the Risk Committee. Option D. Establish a system of KRIs, but delay reporting any significant deviations from these indicators for up to 6 months to allow for comprehensive analysis and contextualization, providing a single annual report to the board. The correct answer is C. Implement a system that defines specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, key risk indicators, CRI, directly linked to identified information security threats and vulnerabilities, and establish a tiered reporting structure that mandates immediate escalation of KRIs exceeding predefined thresholds to the Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, and the Risk Committee. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security management, balancing the need for comprehensive risk monitoring with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the imperative of timely, actionable reporting. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant method for continuous risk assessment and communication within the specified regulatory framework. A robust risk monitoring and reporting system is crucial for demonstrating due diligence, enabling proactive threat mitigation, and ensuring accountability. The chosen approach must align with the principles of effective risk management and the specific requirements of the relevant regulatory body. The correct approach involves establishing a framework that utilizes key risk indicators, CRI, directly tied to the organization's specific threat landscape and business objectives, coupled with a structured reporting mechanism that ensures timely escalation of significant deviations to relevant stakeholders. This aligns with best practices in security management, emphasizing a proactive and data-driven approach to risk. Regulatory frameworks often mandate that organizations maintain effective systems for identifying, assessing, and managing risks, and this approach directly supports those requirements by providing a continuous feedback loop. The ethical imperative is to ensure that potential threats are identified and addressed before they can cause harm, protecting the organization and its stakeholders. An approach that relies solely on ad hoc incident reporting fails to provide a forward-looking perspective and may only capture risks after they have materialized, leading to reactive rather than proactive security measures. This can be a regulatory failure if the framework requires a systematic and continuous risk assessment process. Another incorrect approach, focusing only on broad, high-level metrics without specific KRIs, lacks the granularity needed to identify emerging threats or subtle shifts in the risk profile. This can lead to a false sense of security and a failure to meet regulatory expectations for detailed risk oversight. Finally, an approach that delays reporting of significant risk deviations, even if KRIs are in place, undermines the purpose of continuous monitoring and can result in missed opportunities for mitigation, potentially violating regulatory requirements for prompt risk communication. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the specific regulatory obligations regarding risk management and reporting. This involves identifying the organization's critical assets and potential threats, and then developing KRIs that are measurable, relevant, and actionable. The reporting mechanism should be designed to ensure that information flows efficiently to those who can act upon it, with clear escalation paths for critical issues. A continuous review and refinement of the KRI set and reporting processes are essential to adapt to evolving threats and organizational changes. Question 17. System analysis indicates a critical security incident has been detected involving unauthorized access to sensitive customer data. The IT security team has identified the likely source of the breach and has the capability to immediately isolate the affected systems, which would halt further data exfiltration, but might overwrite some volatile forensic evidence. Simultaneously, the legal department is preparing for potential regulatory reporting under the UK GDPR and NIS regulations, which require timely notification. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the security management professional? Option A. Wait for a full forensic analysis to be completed to understand the exact nature and scope of the breach before initiating any containment or reporting procedures. Option B. Immediately isolate the affected systems to prevent further data loss, while simultaneously initiating a forensic imaging process of affected systems and notifying the legal team to prepare for regulatory reporting. Option C. Prioritize a complete forensic imaging of all potentially affected systems before any containment actions are taken to ensure all evidence is preserved. Option D. Immediately implement aggressive containment measures to shut down all network access to and from the affected systems, without regard for potential loss of volatile evidence, to stop the breach as quickly as possible. The correct answer is B. Immediately isolate the affected systems to prevent further data loss, while simultaneously initiating a forensic imaging process of affected systems and notifying the legal team to prepare for regulatory reporting. Explanation. This scenario presents a common yet critical challenge in security management, balancing the immediate need to contain a security incident with the regulatory and legal obligations to report and preserve evidence. The professional difficulty lies in the potential for conflicting priorities. Rushing containment without proper documentation or consideration for forensic integrity could jeopardize legal proceedings or regulatory investigations. Conversely, delaying containment to meticulously preserve every byte of data could allow the incident to spread, causing greater damage and potentially violating breach notification requirements. The correct approach involves a phased incident response that prioritizes containment while simultaneously initiating evidence preservation and preparing for regulatory reporting. This aligns with the principles of responsible incident handling, which emphasize minimizing damage, restoring services, and fulfilling legal and ethical duties. Specifically, in the UK, the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and the Network and Information Systems Regulations, NIS regulations, mandate timely notification of data breaches and security incidents to relevant authorities and affected individuals, often within strict timeframes. A well-defined incident response plan, as expected under these regulations and professional standards like ISO 27001, would outline procedures for immediate containment, evidence collection, and reporting, ensuring that these actions are coordinated and compliant. Failing to initiate containment promptly, while focusing solely on evidence preservation, would be professionally unacceptable. This approach risks significant operational and reputational damage, and could also lead to noncompliance with regulatory requirements to mitigate harm. The delay could be interpreted as negligence, especially if the incident escalates. An approach that prioritizes immediate, aggressive containment without any consideration for evidence preservation or potential regulatory reporting obligations is also professionally flawed. While swift action is crucial, destroying or compromising evidence during containment could render forensic analysis impossible, hindering investigations, and potentially leading to legal repercussions or regulatory penalties for obstruction or failure to cooperate. Furthermore, it might prevent the organization from understanding the root cause, thus failing to implement effective long-term preventative measures. The professional decision-making process in such a situation should follow a structured incident response framework. This involves 1. Activating the incident response plan, 2. Assembling the incident response team, 3. Assessing the incident's scope and impact, 4. Implementing containment strategies that balance speed with evidence preservation, 5. Documenting all actions meticulously, 6. Initiating communication with relevant stakeholders, including legal counsel and regulatory bodies, as dictated by policy and law, 7. Proceeding with eradication and recovery. This systematic approach ensures that all critical aspects of incident management, from technical response to legal and regulatory compliance, are addressed concurrently and effectively. Question 18. The investigation demonstrates that a new critical infrastructure facilities construction project is significantly over budget, and the project manager is proposing to defer the installation of advanced perimeter intrusion detection systems and integrated access control hardware until after the facility is operational, citing immediate cost savings. The project is subject to UK regulatory oversight and requires adherence to National Protective Security Authority (NSA) guidelines. What is the most appropriate course of action for the security management professional overseeing this project? Option A. Advise the project manager to rely on enhanced physical security patrols and temporary measures to compensate for the deferred technological security installations. Option B. Approve the deferral of security system installation, with a commitment to install them within 6 months of operational handover to meet the immediate budget constraints. Option C. Recommend a phased approach where basic security measures are installed during construction, with the understanding that advanced systems will be added later as operational funds become available. Option D. Insist on the immediate integration of all mandated security features as per NSA guidelines and relevant building regulations, even if it requires re-evaluating the project budget or seeking additional funding. Correct answer is D. Insist on the immediate integration of all mandated security features as per NSA guidelines and relevant building regulations, even if it requires re-evaluating the project budget or seeking additional funding. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate cost-saving pressures of a development project against the long-term, legally mandated security requirements for a critical infrastructure facility. The project manager is facing a conflict between budgetary constraints and the absolute necessity of adhering to the specified regulatory framework. Careful judgment is required to ensure that security is not compromised for financial expediency, which could lead to severe legal repercussions and operational vulnerabilities. The correct approach involves prioritizing the integration of all mandated security features during the initial design and construction phases, even if it incurs higher upfront costs. This aligns with the principle of security by design, which is a fundamental tenet of effective facility security management and is often explicitly or implicitly required by regulatory bodies. Specifically, adhering to the UK's National Protective Security Authority (NSA) guidelines and relevant building regulations ensures that the facility meets the minimum security standards from its inception, preventing costly retrofitting and potential noncompliance. This proactive integration is more cost-effective in the long run and ensures the facility's resilience against identified threats. An incorrect approach would be to defer the installation of certain security features, such as advanced access control systems or perimeter intrusion detection, to a later phase to reduce initial construction costs. This directly contravenes the spirit and letter of regulatory requirements that mandate these features for critical infrastructure. Such a decision would expose the facility to immediate security risks and would likely result in significant penalties, fines, and potential operational shutdowns if discovered during regulatory audits or following an incident. Furthermore, it demonstrates a failure to uphold professional ethical obligations to protect the facility and its occupants. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the contractor's general understanding of security, without consulting the specific regulatory framework and seeking expert advice. While contractors are responsible for construction, the ultimate responsibility for ensuring compliance with security regulations lies with the facility owner and its security management professionals. This approach risks overlooking critical, jurisdiction-specific requirements that may not be obvious to a general contractor, leading to non-compliance and potential security gaps. It also fails to demonstrate due diligence in the security design process. A third incorrect approach would be to implement a layered security strategy that is not fully aligned with the mandated requirements, perhaps focusing on visible deterrents like guards over integrated technological solutions. While visible security can be part of a comprehensive strategy, it cannot replace the fundamental, often invisible, security infrastructure mandated by regulations. This approach might appear to address security, but fails to meet the specific, often technical, requirements of the NSA and relevant building codes, leaving the facility vulnerable to threats that these specific measures are designed to mitigate. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework. In this case, UK regulations and NSA guidelines. Security professionals must proactively engage with design and construction teams from the earliest stages, ensuring that all mandated security requirements are incorporated into the blueprints and specifications. This includes conducting risk assessments, threat assessments, and vulnerability assessments to inform the design. When faced with cost pressures, professionals must clearly articulate the regulatory noncompliance risks and long-term cost implications of omitting mandated security features, advocating for adherence to standards as a non-negotiable requirement. Question 19. The analysis reveals that a significant budget cut is proposed for the upcoming fiscal year, impacting the security department's operational expenses. As the security manager, you are tasked with identifying areas for cost reduction within perimeter security. You must propose a strategy that balances financial prudence with the absolute requirement to maintain a secure perimeter, adhering strictly to UK regulatory frameworks and SIA guidelines. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates professional responsibility and regulatory compliance? Option A. Recommend a phased upgrade of the access control system, prioritizing areas with the highest footfall and implementing temporary, less sophisticated manual checks in lower traffic zones, while ensuring all critical areas remain secured with the upgraded system. Option B. Suggest reducing the frequency of perimeter patrols and dimming security lighting in less frequently monitored areas to conserve energy and reduce staffing costs, while maintaining the physical integrity of the fencing. Option C. Advocate for the complete removal of certain non-critical perimeter fencing sections that are deemed to be less vulnerable, reallocating those funds to enhance internal security measures. Option D. Propose replacing the existing high-security, tamper-evident fencing with a lower-cost, standard chain-link fence, arguing that it still provides a physical barrier and significantly reduces material and installation costs. The correct answer is D. Propose replacing the existing high-security, tamper-evident fencing with a lower-cost, standard chain-link fence, arguing that it still provides a physical barrier and significantly reduces material and installation costs. Explanation. The analysis reveals a common ethical dilemma in security management. Balancing cost-effectiveness with the absolute requirement for robust perimeter security as mandated by regulatory frameworks. The challenge lies in the inherent tension between operational budgets and the non-negotiable need to protect assets and personnel. A security professional must exercise sound judgment, informed by regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility, to ensure that cost-saving measures do not compromise the integrity of the perimeter, which is the first line of defense. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes the most critical vulnerabilities and allocates resources accordingly, ensuring that essential perimeter security elements like robust fencing, adequate lighting, and functional access control systems are maintained at a standard that meets or exceeds regulatory requirements. This approach is ethically sound and professionally responsible, because it directly addresses the regulatory mandate for effective perimeter security, which is designed to prevent unauthorized access and mitigate threats. Adherence to such standards is often codified in industry-specific regulations and best practices, such as those outlined by the Security Industry Authority, SIA, in the UK, which emphasizes the need for competent and compliant security operations. An incorrect approach would be to unilaterally reduce the quality or coverage of perimeter security elements solely based on cost. For instance, opting for cheaper, less durable fencing that is easily breached, or significantly reducing lighting levels in key areas, directly contravenes the spirit and letter of regulations that mandate a secure perimeter. Such actions represent a failure to uphold professional duty of care and could lead to regulatory sanctions, reputational damage, and most importantly, a failure to protect the organization's assets and personnel. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a new access control system without adequate testing or training, leading to potential security gaps or operational disruptions, which also falls short of the expected professional standard and regulatory compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to their sector and jurisdiction. This is followed by a thorough risk assessment to identify critical assets and potential threats. Based on this assessment, a cost-benefit analysis should be conducted, but crucially, the benefit side must heavily weigh regulatory compliance and the mitigation of identified risks, rather than solely focusing on financial savings. Any proposed changes or cost-saving measures must be evaluated against their potential impact on the effectiveness of the perimeter security and their adherence to established standards. If a proposed change risks compromising security or regulatory compliance, it should be rejected or modified, until it meets all necessary criteria. Question 20. Stakeholder feedback indicates a desire to streamline the business impact analysis (BIA) process by focusing recovery efforts primarily on functions that directly generate revenue or have the most vocal executive sponsors. Which approach to identifying critical business functions and their RTOS/RPOs is most aligned with regulatory expectations for operational resilience? Option A. A consensus-driven approach where department heads collectively agree on the criticality of their functions and their respective RTOs and RPOs. Option B. A process that prioritizes functions based on the volume of direct revenue generated and the prominence of their executive sponsors, with RTOs and RPOs set accordingly. Option C. A structured methodology that quantifies the impact of disruption across financial, operational, legal, and reputational dimensions for all business functions, and then prioritizes based on these impacts to define RTOs and RPOs. Option D. A simplified approach that relies on historical data from previous disruptions to set RTOs and RPOs, without revalidating current dependencies or impacts. The correct answer is C. A structured methodology that quantifies the impact of disruption across financial, operational, legal, and reputational dimensions for all business functions, and then prioritizes based on these impacts to define RTOs and RPOs. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the strategic objectives of different business units with the overarching regulatory requirements for business continuity and resilience. The pressure to align recovery objectives with perceived immediate business needs, without a thorough understanding of the underlying dependencies and potential systemic impacts, can lead to suboptimal or non-compliant outcomes. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the business impact analysis (BIA) process is robust, data-driven, and demonstrably meets regulatory expectations for identifying critical functions and their associated recovery time objectives (RTO) and recovery point objectives (RPO). The correct approach involves a structured, evidence-based methodology that prioritizes critical business functions based on their impact on the organization's ability to operate, meet regulatory obligations, and maintain customer trust. This approach necessitates engaging with all relevant stakeholders to gather accurate data on dependencies, potential impacts of disruption, financial, reputational, legal, operational, and to collaboratively define realistic RTOs and RPOs. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing financial services or critical infrastructure in the UK, mandate that organizations understand and manage these risks. A BIA that is aligned with these frameworks provides the foundation for effective business continuity and disaster recovery planning, ensuring that resources are allocated appropriately to protect the most vital operations and meet mandated recovery targets. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and prudent risk management expected by regulators. An incorrect approach that prioritizes functions based solely on the loudest stakeholder voice or perceived immediate revenue generation fails to adequately assess the true criticality of all functions. This can lead to undersourcing the recovery of essential but less vocal functions, potentially causing significant regulatory breaches if these functions are deemed critical by regulators. For example, a function that supports regulatory reporting, even if not a primary revenue driver, could have severe legal and financial consequences if its RTO is not met. Another incorrect approach, relying on historical data without current validation, risks basing recovery objectives on outdated operational realities, making the BIA irrelevant and the subsequent recovery plans ineffective. This demonstrates a failure in due diligence and a lack of proactive risk assessment, which can be viewed as a breach of regulatory expectations for maintaining operational resilience. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape, a commitment to a standardized and objective BIA methodology, and effective stakeholder management. Professionals must advocate for a data-driven approach, ensuring that all critical functions are identified and assessed based on their impact and dependencies, not just their visibility or perceived importance. This involves challenging assumptions, seeking corroborating evidence, and clearly documenting the rationale behind the defined RTOs and RPOs, thereby building a defensible and compliant BIA.